Okay, we have Cait Scudder, also known as the Millionaire Mother, on the podcast today. I'm so excited that she's taking the time to do this. Thank you so much, Cait, for being here. You're in the throes of postpartum with three kids under four, under 3.5. Is
Under
that
three and a
correct?
half. Yeah, it's wild. But thank you so much for having me.
Wild is a great way. Yes, you're welcome. Wild is a great way to describe it. I don't know any other way to describe what this experience must be like for you. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know what it must be like to schedule and organize and all of the things and just have the energy and the wherewithal to do something like this. So we appreciate you. My listeners appreciate you and we'll get right into it. So for those of you who don't know Cait, she is an entrepreneur, a mother, she's a homesteader as well. And so she also mentors women to create the business that they really desire, that they really deserve. And I really want us to take in her words, take in her birth story deeply and openly, because from what I've heard of what you've said in the past on other podcasts, the way that you connect to your body, the reverence that you have for the birth process itself, for motherhood itself, and the way that you honor the true power that we have when we come through this rite of passage into motherhood is incredible, and the way that you can articulate it. So I'm so excited for our listeners to hear what you have to say. And I'd love to get started with your birth stories. You can start with either one or interweave them. James is probably the most lucid one in your mind right now. And so yeah, we'll get started there.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Well, thank you for having me. I love being here and I'm so happy to share. Very much an open book. Gosh, it's so interesting, because I've had three births now in the last 3.5 years, and every single one of them has been so different, and every single one of them has shaped me in such a profound way. And I think that, when we talk about motherhood, when we talk about matrescence, when we talk about birth, so often I think we think that the big transition is going from maiden to mother, is going from 0 to 1. And just steaming fresh off of my third birth right now, I will say that every single birth that I have had I have been reborn through. And this is what I think is so powerful about birth. It's like there's a way in which you have multiple kids, right?
Too.
Right. So there's this way in which, when we come at it the second time around, we quote unquote know what we are getting ourselves into, but it's sort of this like false sense of safety and familiarity because the landscape of birth is so humbling every single time. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk about all three of them, and I feel like taking any one of them in isolation, there have been so many important lessons from each one. And I will start at the beginning because James, it's so interesting because physically, James is Jack and Ella, my first two, could not be more different. She came out and I was like, did they hand me the right baby? She's very fair skinned. She has light hair, blue eyes. She's very much my husband's like physical complexion and appearance. And Jack is like my little mini me. He's my twin, brown hair, brown eyes, thicker build. And James is like a pure overlap between the two. He's got so many
Wow.
features of Jack, but his coloring and his shape and his color, his eyes and his hair, he's so much more like Ella. So it's fascinating because just like their physical appearance has that pattern, the birth stories are very, very much echoed in that same way. So Ella and Jack could not
Mm.
have been more different. And James was really kind of a hybrid of both of them. And so I'll share a bit about all three. And I think that that comment will make more sense when I
Mm.
do. So with Ella, we got pregnant on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2020. So 3 months before the world started going crazy. We had just moved literally less than 2 weeks prior out to Los Angeles, where we didn't have a community yet. We were just bright eyed and bushy tailed. We just moved back from Bali, my husband and I, where we met. and lived together for years before we decided, all right, we're ready to move to the States. We're ready to put down some roots, get some land, start a family, build a community. And my husband's Australian and I'm from New England. And so California seemed like a good quote unquote middle ground. And so LA it was, got pregnant. Little did we know that the world was about to shut down. I had a really rough first trimester. I was basically like in fetal position on the couch or at IKEA, like shopping for furniture to fill out our apartment. And by the time I was finally starting to feel better, around 13, 14 weeks, bang, it was March 2020. The entire world shut down. And we just had no ability to build a community, to make good friends. We didn't have any family around. And I started to become more
Mm,
and more pregnant. And so it was June 2020 when I was 6 months pregnant when we just decided this is not how we want to bring our baby into the world. We did like a real life boomerang. We packed up, we sold all of our stuff that we just acquired, packed up the rest of it, and road tripped back across the country and moved to Maine and set up shop there. And I birthed my daughter October 11th, 2020. So with Ella's birth, I took a hypnobirthing class when I was pregnant. I went the doula route, the midwife route. I had a doula. Our doula obviously couldn't travel with us back to Maine, being from California, but I was very much planning for a home birth. And
mm,
so, and my mom, also notably, my mom delivered me 2 weeks early and my brother 3 weeks early. So 37 and 38 weeks. So I had everybody under the sun telling me, oh, you're definitely going to be early. My biggest advice, mamas, is do not listen to anybody and throw away all preconceptions about when you think you're going to have your baby because these little bubbas have timelines of their own. 40 weeks is an average. It is not the standard. Full term can be anywhere from 37, 37 and a half to 43 weeks. And so I was like, I'm definitely going to deliver at 38 weeks. I'm athletic, it's in my genetics, blah, blah, blah. My daughter came at 41 and 6. And so the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy were, I mean, the last 4 weeks really, because I was 38 weeks came and I'm like, yep, any moment now. And then another hour would pass and another day would pass. And this happened for weeks. And so
mm,
by the time she came, I was just like at the end of my rope. I was trying to do everything to control when she would come. I mean, without having like a medical induction,
mm.
but I was sleeping one night and I just felt this gush of water come out of me. And I turned over to my side and I tapped Toby on the shoulder. I was like, babe, my water's broke. So that's how I went into labor with Ella. And we had the birth tub all set up in our room, the twinkly lights. But my excitement very quickly turned to like, oh shit, like what are we going to do now? Because the waters were green. And
Mm,
I was like, I don't think that's good. And so we called our midwife and she was like, yes, that's meconium. Let me get there. She got there, confirmed that that's what it was, and was like, I'm so sorry, but we're going to need to transfer to the hospital because that's a sign that the baby could be in distress. Turns out
mm.
Ella was completely fine, but we had to transfer at the very beginning of labor. And so that was
Mm.
really devastating for me.
Yeah.
And I could, go on and on about the first birth, but suffice it to say, it was extremely challenging. All of the like gently just connect with your body and your baby that I learned in the hypnobirthing classes went out the window because it was masks. It was the whole vibe that I did not want was the hospital birth with Ella. And it
Yeah.
was
'Cause
it
it
was
was
really
the peak
scary.
of the
Yeah, it was the
pandemic.
peak of the pandemic. It was really scary. It was really, they wanted me to wear a mask, and I was like, fuck off. I am not wearing a mask. Like, I need to be able to breathe through these contractions. But what's really interesting, Cindy, is that I thought that I had learned quote unquote breathing techniques in this hypnobirthing. But what I did not know and I didn't realize until I got to my second birth is that the way that I was relating to my breath, the way that I was relating to the contractions, I was using my breath to basically grit through and hold my breath to get to the
Mm,
other side. I was in
mm,
so much active resistance, which brought on so much more pain. And
mhm,
without going down a whole sidetrack, there was definitely medical malpractice in that birth. Like they would not let me go to the bathroom. Nobody was paying attention to if I had been urinating, even though I was hooked up to an IV. So after I birthed Ella, and I had a third degree, almost fourth degree tear, like was in surgery for the first hour, healing from that tear, no golden hour. It was just horrible. I really had to
Mm,
pee, but I couldn't feel anything down there because of all that anesthesia. And so they hooked me up to a catheter and emptied 1.5 liters of urine out of me. Like I could have
oh my
burst
gosh.
to the point of sepsis. And it just was a whole thing. And so I had so much healing to do from that. I had a natural, quote unquote, natural, unmedicated birth, but it was about as traumatic and as painful as you can imagine inside of a hospital. Like nurses holding my knees up to my ears, screaming, push. It was like everything that they depict in the movies that I
Yeah.
did not want. NICU nurses on their phone as I'm crowning. I'm like, anyway, it was a
Mm,
whole thing. So I had so much healing to do from that experience.
yeah.
And so I was on another interview earlier today and we were talking about, when we hear about incredible results, which is, and this is the happy part of the story, my second birth, my birth with my first son, Jack, was night and day. It was the most redemptive, healing, probably the single biggest life-changing event in my entire life was Jack's birth. I just get teary
Wow.
even talking about it because I devoted myself so wholeheartedly to complete healing mentally,
Mm,
emotionally, spiritually, physically between Ella's birth and Jack's birth. And I was like, I know that birth can be a different experience than that. I know that I don't need to hold on to that trauma in my body, but I couldn't do it alone. So I worked with a pelvic floor physical therapist, a pain-free birth mentor. I
mm,
just dove in on every possible level to healing and rewiring a hypnotherapist, repatterning myself to make myself, my body, my spirit available for a different experience. And I
mhm.
found out that I was pregnant with Jack on Ella's first birthday. So all my kids are about 19 and a half, 20 months apart. So they're very much back to back,
Mm.
which has its pros and cons. It's beautiful in that they're like amazing mates. And after this third birth, I'm like, Mama needs a break. My body is tapped. And so I'm really, really focused on,
Oh, yeah.
high nutrient density, replenishment, all the things. But in my healing journey, one of the things, I mean, I had a lot, like I said, there was like physical trauma that I had to undo. One of my biggest fears, which sounds maybe so silly, but because of that bladder thing, I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to pee during labor. And so I worked
Mhm,
with, a birth trauma specialist to release that. And I was like
mhm.
peeing every half an hour in my birth with Jack. And I'm like, I can do it. They're like, yes, this is like a normal thing that you're supposed to be able to do. But it was just so healing and so redemptive on so many levels. And I birthed Jack. Jack was also quote unquote late. He was 41 and 2, and he was 10 pounds and 15 ounces. And I birthed
Wow.
him at home in the water. And it was truly a pain
Mm,
free birth. And I wouldn't say orgasmic. I did not have an orgasm, but
wow.
it was pain free and it was the most empowering experience of my life. And what is so cool about Jack's birth is that I radically redefined my relationship with sensation. And
Mhm,
rather than experiencing each wave as something to brace against and like hold my breath through, I really focused on just like melting and allowing and embracing it, letting it like wash through me. And
mm,
that transformed absolutely everything. And what is so cool is I experienced something called FER, the fetal ejection reflex, and my body pushed this baby out. I did not actively bear down or push at all. My body pushed out an 11-pound baby by itself. And it rewired my entire existence because if I were, in retrospect, if I am to look back at Ella's birth and see what each birth taught me and what each of those thresholds brought me, Ella's birth very much showed me because I mean, I couldn't walk unassisted across a room for 6 weeks after Ella's birth. I was in that rough of shape, and it just showed me you can push through and persevere and like get through hard shit. That's what you can do. And Jack's birth showed me you can surrender and allow and open up to magic beyond your wildest dreams. So if my first birth showed me like my power in the expression of my ability to push through and persevere, my second showed me a power that was softer, quieter, more effortless, still
mm,
effort, but in a different way than I had ever known. And what's
Mm,
interesting is that James's birth was really a combination of both. I was saying this to my birth coach. I can't honestly say that James's birth was pain free because I was experiencing a lot of pain leading up into James's birth. My hips were really, really sore. James was a big baby, also. He was 11 pounds and 1 ounce. And I was carrying really low. I was having trouble sleeping. So my back and my body was already at 42 and 2, which is when James came. He was my latest. I was convinced that this baby was going to come early. Do not do that to yourself, ladies. Don't convince yourself. Don't have any preconceived notions. But I was already feeling like sore in my body.
mm,
And I had an entire day of early labor with James where I was like, my capacity was already stretched by the time I had gone into labor because it had taken so long. And then I'm like, all right, great. Waves that are rhythmic. We're in it. Let's go. And then I had a whole day of early labor where contractions got to be as close together as 6 minutes and as far apart as 2.5 hours. And Cindy, I was like ready to rip out my hair. I was like, I am going to be pregnant for all of eternity. Like, does my body even know how to do this? Why am I in early labor only? What is going on? And so rather than be in resistance, because I know that that energy is not going to help bring a baby, I was just like, fuck it. I'm going to be pregnant forever. I'm going to bed. And I went to bed around 10 o'clock and I woke up at midnight with like strong waves, and active labor had very much begun. And
mm,
James was born
mm.
8 hours later. He was born at 8:05 and in the morning.
Wow.
And so his labor was so interesting because it required me to surrender on so many levels, surrender the timeline that I thought he was going to come in, surrender the fact that everyone's like, oh, it's your third kid. He's just going to fall out of you. It's just going to take 45 minutes. It's going to take 1 hour, and surrender all of that and surrender to my story, my body, my baby, what was wanting to happen. So there was definitely this active surrender code and surrender element, but there was also very much like the active willpower to get through the labor because the birth tub ended up having a hole in it. So we weren't able to use the tub. So a lot of the like ease and
Mm,
relief that I was able to find in my birth with Jack that allowed for this like deep softening. I didn't have that with James. And so there was more like muscling through whilst also softening and allowing. So it was like the medicine of James in so many ways. It's like showing it. I recorded an entire podcast episode on James's birth story. So if anyone wants like the full version, you can go listen to it on my podcast. But when I think about the medicine of what James's birth brought me, it was very much expanding my capacity far beyond what I ever thought I was capable of doing. And after I birthed James, I was kneeling on my knees beside the bed with my forearms pressed against the bed, and Toby caught James. I kept saying to Toby for the rest of the day, I cannot believe I did that. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. I cannot believe I did that. And at the very end, the contractions had slowed down, and my midwives were like, does she need nipple stipulate like stimulation? And I was like, no, I need to surrender enough to go into the intensity of the sensation that I want to avoid. And I need a minute
mm.
to get out of my own fucking way, to go right into the middle of that and bring this baby home. And when I did that, I had a huge tsunami like wave, and James came out in one push.
Wow. Wow. Such an incredible comparison of the three and how the way that they look, even in appearance, mirrors how
Right?
the birth was.
It's
It's
wild.
so wild. And you really the way you describe the different births, it's like a full spectrum of what I hear so many women speak about. It's the difficulty, the potential trauma that we can experience, the disempowerment that unfortunately a lot of women experience, and the redemption that comes from some women who are like something else is possible. I'm going to resource myself. I am going to get the support that I need. I'm going to be well informed, and I'm going to do this differently for the second time. So, whether it's a VBAC or you're doing a vaginal birth after one that was a little bit more difficult, more tricky, more traumatizing, just being able to tell yourself something else is possible, but I know that I can't do it alone.
100%, 100%. And, it's so interesting because I think what I was going to say before is I think that we see incredible results, whether that is in business and it's like, oh, a seven-figure business or a six-figure launch or 100K month, or we see in birth an orgasmic birth or a pain-free birth. And we think, well, isn't that nice for them? Wouldn't it be nice if? And we see the seeming like ease of the result. But there is so much devotion and effort that actually goes into cultivating the ability to experience that ease. And that was definitely the case for me with the healing work that I did between Ella and Jack. It wasn't just like I meditated by myself my way into a pain-free birth. I invested a ton of time, a lot of money, and energy into and it's not like it costs like $1 million to heal from birth trauma, but I made it my assignment to invest in my healing like I really wanted change. And I think that that's just important to know. It's like when we want to experience a transformation, it is 1,000,000% available to us, and we got to show up for the work.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And I often talk about like on average, women are experiencing birth 1, 2, 3 times. I rarely see families of 4 or more these days. I know some women have like 5, 6, 10 kids, right? But it's quite rare. And so during those moments, like some of the most transformative moments that are going to dictate the years that follow, how you bond with your baby, your breastfeeding journey, how you heal. Why not invest? Why not get the support that you need now when you need it most instead of having to repair afterwards, right?
100%.
So if we want these, quote unquote positive births or a birth that at least is satisfying and can potentially be one of the most euphoric, ecstatic experiences of your life. This is the time that you get the resources that you want, that you need, when you get to say no, when you get to say yes, when you get to pull in the people that you actually feel supported by and say no to the people that you don't feel supported by, and really get your needs met as a woman, because that is our power. That is our birthright to have the experience that we not only desire, but that we deserve, that our babies deserve, that our whole family deserves. And when we do that, we impact our whole community. Because when a woman births on her terms in an empowered way, that has ripple effects and that imprints something onto the baby, that love, that safety, that trust that is in that baby's cellular memory. And we're raising a generation that has that as its cellular memory, that adults will interact with each other in that way in the future. And a lot of the global issues that I see, they might not completely go away, but they won't be as amplified and as intense as we see them right now.
100%. And I could not agree more. The birth, I mean, and I see it in my children. I see the way that my firstborn, and you never know what is just their personality and how they come out, but absolutely. I mean, my son, Jack, so grounded, so happy, so just landed. And Ella has a little bit more like anxiety and doesn't like people touching her. I
Mm,
mean, she's also just, I mean, she's incredibly precocious and brilliant and, just gorgeous in every way. And she's a little more like, I don't want you touching me. And I think that that's because she got like passed around to all of the before Toby was like, just give her to me. If she can't be on the mom, like give her to me. And,
mhm.
took her and but that was like her first experience out of the womb. And I know that that made an impact on her.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm calling that the profound imprint. Like so many of the women who have been in the birth world, who do birth work for have done it for decades, see the same thing, talk about the same thing, this imprint that happens when a new life is entering this reality. And we really need to honor that and revere that and shift the paradigm of how we see birth, how we take care of women who are in labor, who are about to give birth, and in the postpartum period, because it not only affects them currently right now, but it affects us as humanity moving forward. And so I think we're going to see a lot of shifts happen because of this, like, silent but not so silent revolution that's taking place, where women like yourself are saying like something else is possible. So I'm going to do the work. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to get the resources that I need, the support that I need to make that happen. And it's the same thing with our businesses. So a lot of my listeners are entrepreneurial women as well. And and it's so funny. I feel like women who are in touch with their intuition, who can see the big picture of things, we all kind of have come to this conclusion without a conference, without a book or anything. It's just like our life journey mimics the labor, like the gestation, the labor, the birth, the postpartum period. It mirrors it so profoundly.
a
And
hundred.
yeah, and I'd like for you to speak more about that because you articulate it so well. It's like the like even the embryo, right? Like those are like the beginning stages of a business when it's just kind of like in the idea stage and you're just kind of like thinking about it, talking to people, making connections, and that's when it's most volatile, when it's most likely that things may or may not hold, right? And then yeah, I'd like to pass it over for you to speak a little bit more about how that process unfolds.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just feel like birth is the consummate metaphor for everything in business. And like I said, I was just doing
Mhm.
another interview earlier today, and she was asking me about the birth of the rebrand of the Millionaire Mother. And I just said to her, like,
Mm.
the Millionaire Mother came about a year and a half, 2 years, to over 2 years actually, after I had become a mom. And I just became sick of s- treating motherhood, birth as like a side conversation in my work. And I'm like, this is the conversation I want to be
Yeah.
having. And so I use the metaphor and all of this, metaphors that come off of birth in business all of the time. And one of the ways that I think about this so profoundly, and um, that has impacted me personally, both in birthing my children and particularly my two sons, my last two, and business, is rewiring my relationship with sensation and contraction. So we think, and I don't like to use the word contraction in labor. I love to think about it as a wave, but when we think about contraction, we talk about expansion all the time in the online coaching world, in the business world, in the personal development world, is like expanding into our highest selves. And I think as a culture, we are obsessed with the shiny results, the massive thing, the success, the quantum leap, what have you. But what we gloss over so much is the way that expansion happens. We are obsessed, and I think this is the byproduct of living in a patriarchal society where it's like, show us the like shiny scrubbed final product, but don't show me the grit, the mess, the like needing to wipe poop off your butt when because you like are having contract, like, we don't want to see that side. We just want the beautiful baby newborn photos with the perfect snuggly swaddle. We don't want like the stretch marks and the bloodstained sheets and the like breast milk everywhere and the like sobbing tears and like the poopy postpartum undies. We don't want any of that. We just want the other side. And what I think is so profound that birth brings us back to is that contraction and expansion are two sides of the same coin. And we get to the greatest
Mm.
expansion of our lives. Expansion. You want to talk about a quantum fucking leap? You want to talk about a miracle? Talk to me about how a 15-inch head comes through a vagina. Talk to me about that. That is the miracle, ladies and gentlemen. Mic drop. That is the miracle. And yet, women do this and they still wonder if they can make a ton of money. I'm like, honey, you have already done the impossible. The money is the easy part. But you know what I mean? And it's like, it just like in birth, we think, and as I shared in my birth story with Ella, I thought when I was experiencing the intensity of contraction, I'm like, oh my God, this is so intense. This must be wrong. I must be doing this wrong. Oh, like help. Let me get through the, no, no, no. No, pushing that away. Oh, this must be wrong. No, this can't be right. I must be doing something wrong. In the second, I was like, thank you. Here we go. Yes. Like sensation. Ooh, okay. A wave. Let me welcome that. This isn't wrong. This is how this baby is going to be born. We can get to a result in business either way. Fighting it, damning every time it feels bad, condemning every time it's intense, and telling ourselves it must be wrong and there must be a better way. Or we can welcome the contraction experiences, the times when, any number of things that can cause us to contract in business. Something happens with a team member, something happens with a client, a launch doesn't go the way that we want, a tech platform fails, Mercury retro, you name it. There's going to be a zillion million. And by the way, this doesn't go away when you make a certain amount of money. Like
Mm,
there's always going to be shit that comes up with running a business, no matter how much money you make. So embrace that now and cultivate a different relationship with uncomfortable sensation. Because when you do that, and this was my absolute transfiguration of self that I learned in preparing myself for Jack's birth and truly having a pain-free birth in that experience, is like when we learn how to rewire our relationship with discomfort, with intensity, with contraction, we radically rewire our relationship and ability to experience expansion.
mm,
And that applies in birth and business.
mhm. So well said. Though I think my ability to just hold both of the high emotions, the ones that we typically gravitate towards, like the joy, the bliss, the connection, like that feeling you get when like your kids are playing, you get that like a glimmer sensation where you're like, this is heaven. Like this is what they talk about, I'm so fulfilled. I'm filled with joy and I love them so much and all of these things while also experiencing like the deep grief that can go along with just being a human being on the planet right now, with potential heartbreak, with losing a loved one, with building a business and feeling the ultimate like the highs and the lows, the hope and the letdown and the fear of expansion while because that's part of it too in labor. Like there's a fear of expanding your body that much. And so a lot of women contract in response to that instead of surrendering and allowing that body to do what it's meant to be doing. And
That's
so being
so
able
true.
yeah, yeah, and it's that relationship that you're talking about to the discomfort, right? To the
Mhm.
potential pain or the intensity. And so being able to hold the full breadth of human emotion and human sensation is what cultivates that magic that can happen when women experience, an potentially orgasmic, euphoric, ecstatic birth, or when you finally get to taste the fruits of the labor that you've put into creating a new business, to birthing a new business into the world. It requires this ability to experience the full spectrum of human emotion and sensation.
So true. So well said. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, Kate, what do you normally see with women from your own experience and your experience coaching women? What do you normally see are the main obstacles? I would see in this context, it's a lot of obstacles in women, first of all, even wanting to invest in the birth preparation process and into their postpartum period, or obstacles that they come across that might lead them more towards feeling low, like they can't do this, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, from the business world, feeling like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to give up. This isn't for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think that when it comes to, I mean, the thing that just intuitively comes to me when I hear that question is choosing the influences that we are taking in. I think especially when it comes to birth, it can be, especially for first-time parents, it can be really easy to ingest every story and out of curiosity, gobble up fear stories and take in a lot of the like cultural narratives. And I just think it's so important. And the same thing is true in business, right? If we're like taking in, you have to do it this way and you have to build this funnel and it has to be like this. I think that a lot of women get freaked out because they're like, oh my gosh, this is how this person or this expert says it has to be. And I think that
Mm,
one of the most powerful and important things that we can do as sovereign women is to sculpt our own reality by choosing the influences that we desire to take in. And just like if we, not that I am in this particular season of my life right now, but if we're trying to like sculpt our bodies, right, we're going to be mindful about what we're taking into our bodies because
mm,
what we take in is going to directly impact what we see. The same thing is true with what we ingest in terms of stories, energetics, support. If we are ingesting fear, negativity, doubt, naysaying, that's going to drastically impact the results that we get. Just like if we are taking in encouragement, positive examples, grounded, practical solutions, support in our corner, that's going to change the outcomes that we have in birth and in business.
mhm. Yeah, that's why a lot of people are told not to really listen to negative birth stories until after their baby comes
Mhm.
out because it can really imprint something onto our brain and then we can respond like that during the birth process. And the same thing
Totally.
goes for while you're
And
yeah.
sometimes we don't like actively seek it out, but it might come up. And I want to just say something on that because that I think that's bound to happen. And I have like a little practice that I do. So I'm going to just share this in case it's helpful to anyone in your audience. If so, a friend ends up being like, "Oh, you're pregnant," and then they just like accidentally dump, on you a story, or you're listening even to this podcast and me sharing about my experience with my first feels,
Mhm.
potentially triggering and scary to you. You get to hear whatever is shared, and I just want you to almost energetically imagine like a boundary. Imagine yourself in a bubble. Imagine just this like field of white light protecting you. And whatever anyone else's story is like you are so clear. You can have your experience. I hear that you had this experience. I hear that that was your truth. That is not me. That is separate from me. And I release and shield myself from any reality that is not my own. And you just get to like have a clear boundary in your energetic field. So I also want to say, I think it's important not to be too precious around like, oh my God, like I heard someone like didn't have a good experience and now I'm like traumatized and can't get it out of my system. Like that's not true. You are a sovereign, powerful, freaking woman and you
Mm,
get to clear shit that is not yours and send it back to source. We don't have to attack and be angry at the person who's just expressing what their birth story was, but we also don't need to take it on. You get to send it back to the earth who gets to compost and digest that. And you get to clear your energetic field. So I think that's really important to know as well, is that we can
yeah.
overhear something, but not take it in.
Absolutely. We have autonomy over what we
Yes.
take in and what we don't and we're really powerful as women. Like we have that ability and we need to just I think remind ourselves of that. And when other women do that and are an example of it, it reminds us like, oh yeah, I can do that too. Like just like how Cait may have not had the first birth experience that was her ideal, and then still, she moved through that and had 2 successive births after that, that initiated her into her power, that taught her amazing lessons. I love the words that you use, that gave you a code, that gave you the medicine that you needed to be the version of yourself, that
Mhm.
birthed a different version of yourself. I love that language because we often are taught to fear labor and birth. We're not taught that it can actually give us the codes and the medicine that we need
Oh my God,
for the
I love
different
it. I said this to Toby
mm,
after, but like I absolutely love birth. I think it's one of the most ecstatic, even if it's not like orgasmic in that pleasure way for everyone. Some people do experience that.
mm.
And I don't know anyone who's experienced that with an 11-pound baby. If you found them, let me know. I'd love to chat with them. But It is definitely it's extraordinary. I don't know any other experience where we get to be so in our bodies and so in tune with the intrinsic primal essence of life itself. It's out of this world. It's like the most out of this world experience, and where a lot of like plant medicine, and that's the biggest thing I can analogize it to, is like a plant medicine journey, like a shamanic plant medicine journey. But rather than dissociating from our bodies, we are like the most in our bodies that we could ever be, and are
Mhm.
truly like the cosmic slip and slide between heaven and earth. And I just think it's the most extraordinary thing.
The cosmic slip and slide. I love that saying because I usually use the word portal, but I love the humor that you bring to that analogy. Yeah, I think that's why I'm passionate about this work because like you can either fear it, right? Or you can embrace it and savor it and like become a new version of who you are and be initiated into motherhood through this rite of passage, surrounded by support and your sisters who understand what's going on and connect to the deep innate wisdom of your body and that the codes that have been passed down to us through our lineage. Or, you can just dissociate or
Right.
fear it, right? So it's definitely a choice and it's the choice is always ours, but it's so amazing to witness this kind of wave of women who are standing up and saying like first of all, it doesn't have to be the way that we're taught it's going to be conventionally. There's another way and we're going to come together and we're going to support each other through that. And through this level of power that's rising up through women, I also see that the next wave is going to be women and mothers coming together and saying that there's also another way that we can interact with each other as humans around the world. And it doesn't have to be in the form of violence and war and aggression and othering and dehumanizing. Actually, we get to stand shoulder to shoulder and we can make a new reality. We can birth a new reality together. And I think it starts with this birth process. We get in touch with that power and then we're like, okay, we have another power.
100%. I could not agree more. And I think there is nothing like birth to connect us to our power. Like, I mean, it's just the most primal and immediate access point that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cait, before we head off, I like to ask my guests because we talked about that profound imprint that when a new life is coming into this world and when we birth on our terms and we're supported as women, as the mothers, we imprint love, safety, and trust onto this new life. And those are all signatures of oxytocin. Or, unfortunately, if there's an experience that's less than ideal, something else gets imprinted. So it's survival mode, mistrust, a lack of safety, right? And Barbara Harper, who is the water birth expert, she always says that that lasts a lifetime, right? So we can either imprint what we want our next generation to be imprinted with, or not. But with that being said, what would you like to imprint onto the listeners of the podcast? So it's women, families preparing for the birth process. It could be moms in the postpartum period. It could be women who are preparing or even like have the idea, the starting point of creating and birthing a business, a creative endeavor into the world. What would you like to imprint onto the listeners?
Mm. You, your body, your body is so infinitely wise and so wired for healing, for optimal expression. I would really want to imprint such a profound self trust on the intelligence of your being. and all the support that you can surround yourself with that returns you again and again to the power of your body. Because we live in a world where there is so much noise, there is so much distraction, there's so many neon signs, proverbial neon signs pointing you everywhere, but the still small, quiet, potent voice within you, that is the voice that knows, whether it is in business, whether it is in birth, you truly have what you need within you. And returning to that again and again and again, you're going to find your greatest source of power.
Mm, I love that. Thank you so much
You're
for
so
taking the time to
welcome.
do this. I appreciate you. So, how can the listeners get in touch with you? How could they work with you? How could they find out more about what you're up to these days? I mean,
Uh,
besides just being in the throes of postpartum.
Yes, 100%. Well, I hang out all the time on Instagram. You can come check me out there. I'm at the Millionaire Mother. I also have a podcast, the Millionaire Mother podcast, where we share weekly episodes. You can absolutely come hang out over there. And if you want to go deeper, I have an incredible membership of hundreds of mother and aspiring mother CEOs and entrepreneurs called The Village. So you can just DM me about that on Instagram if you're curious. And I also run a year-long mastermind called the Millionaire Mother Experience, MME, for women who are really ready to become the first millionaires in their lineage and work together in a closer way. So all of that is on offer, but definitely plug in on Insta and the podcast because there's so many golden gems there if you want to just familiarize yourself with my world and work some more.
Amazing. I'm going to link all of that up for the listeners, and I'm sure that they will get in touch with you and check you out on Instagram. Thank you so much again for being here, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Bye, Cait.